The Eurozone, challenged by structural deficiencies, high unemployment, particularly among the youth, and simmering debt concerns, is facing dismal long-term growth projections. This current economic stagnation underpins the confrontations between European sovereign governments and the European Union. Indeed, this year's Euro challenge isn't simply an economic one. Some increasingly advance the notion that Italy, the fourth largest economy in the EU, and the third largest economy in the Eurozone, might leave the Union. An Ital exit, combined with Brexit, could effectively destroy the dreams of a united Europe.
Unemployed and working class people are losing faith in the system. Protests such as Gilets Jaunes in France, Euroscepticism and uncertainty have replaced perseverance and productivity. There's a certain fragility in Europe, and Italy's the country we are most worried about as a potential flashpoint towards yet another European crisis. The stakes are very high, and we are here today to light a clear path out of the darkness. Good morning, my name is Sachin Bali.
I'm Connor Serrati.
I am Dennis Collins.
I'm Garrett Larson.
And I'm William Mayo. Italy is burdened with low growth, high debt, and high unemployment. The country's projected deficit for 2019 may be as high as 3% of their GDP, and it continues to pile on debt. We believe that this is distorted and does not reflect the economic potential of this major world economy. We are here today to present economic, financial, and societal changes that are urgently needed to reform Italy and stem the tide of discontent in Europe. A drive for strategic and effective fiscal policy and structural reform in Italy will ignite economic growth for the nation and for the Eurozone.
Let's first look to the Eurozone as a whole. On July 26, 2012, ECB President Mario Draghi stared down a debt crisis and recession with a public promise to protect the euro. Uttering three simple words, whatever it takes, Draghi framed his legacy and launched a roadmap for deepening the economic and monetary union. Last month, Draghi has once again injected monetary drugs into the Eurozone, citing continued weakness and pervasive uncertainty, as he announced cuts to the bank's growth and inflation forecasts. This seems like a familiar pattern, crisis after crisis with no lasting solution.
Let's look at the data. As you can see from this chart, GDP growth in the Eurozone has slowed to its lowest level in 4 years, growing by only 0.2% in the fourth quarter of 2018, compared to the previous quarter and matching Brexit minor UK growth. Eurozone annual growth for the full year of 2018 came in at 1.8%, failing to reach European Central Bank's projection of 2%.
Economic growth in the Eurozone, represented in blue, has been comparatively much weaker than that of the United States and China, and the outlook for the European economy has darkened in recent weeks. In early April, the IMF sharply lowered its growth outlook for the Eurozone to just 1.3% in 2019, a big cut from 1.6% just 3 months earlier.
Manufacturing is a key area of concern for the Eurozone. February PMI survey data from the IHS Markit, shown in the chart, showed that Eurozone manufacturing dropped to a 68-month low of 49.2. March and April readings of 47.5 and 47.8 confirm that the long-term trend is heading towards stagnation. These recent readings are below the crucial 50-point level, signaling a contraction in manufacturing activity.
The Eurozone labor market, however, has strung together positive trends. Unemployment in February remained unchanged at 7.8%, equaling its lowest rate in over 10 years.
Let's now turn our attention to the inflation picture in the Eurozone. In November, Mario Draghi expressed confidence that core inflation will gradually rise, thanks to higher wage growth and a recovery in producer and import prices. Although oil prices have popped throughout the start of 2019, wages are rising and employment is high. Consumer prices have repeatedly disappointed, and underlying inflation remains.
Headline inflation in the 19 countries sharing the euro slowed to 1.4% in March, short of market expectations and well below the ECB's target of almost 2%.
Over the past 4 years, the ECB has bought 2.6 trillion euros for the government and corporate bonds in order to stimulate short-term GDP growth and block inflation. Although ECB governors indicated in December that they would officially bring this unprecedented bond buying scheme to a close, it seems like the ECB isn't quite ready to pull the plug on this cheap source of money, launching a new loan program this month in response to risks that still clearly tilt to the downside.
Let's turn our attention back to Italy. As you can see by this chart, Italy's economic pain has lasted for almost 25 years. This feeble trend, combined with anger over illegal immigration, triggered a populist move to go for the League and the Five-Star Movement in elections a year ago. The winning party promised to increase spending, decrease taxes, and reverse pension reform that raised their retirement age.
Italy's National Statistics Institute, ISTAT, reported a 0.1% contraction in GDP during the fourth quarter of 2018, throwing Italy into recession for the third time in a decade. over the whole of 2018, Italy's growth came in at 1%, compared to 1.6% in 2017.
The manufacturing sector is leading the downturn in Italy, with the production of goods declining at its strongest rate since 2013. Companies have been reporting underlying weaknesses for several months now, worried about trade wars, political uncertainty, and tightening financial conditions. Over the past year, manufacturing confidence has dropped from an index of 110.3 to 100.8, the lowest reading since February of 2015. As you can see from this chart, Italian firms are losing faith in business, and this correlates to low growth. Italy, the third largest economy in the Eurozone, as part of the World Bank's 2018 Ease of Doing Business report, Italy ranks 46th out of 190 countries, covered in terms of its regulatory and entrepreneurial environments.
What about household confidence? Today, Italy has the lowest birth rate in all of Europe. Only 464,000 Italian births were registered in 2017, the lowest number on record. According to Francisco Scalone, a demographer from the University of Bologna, young Italians are increasingly forfeiting children for economic survival. Coupled with an aging population, this declining fertility rate, as displayed by the chart, has put enormous and intractable stress on the Italian pension system, and more importantly, depleted Italy's stock of human capital.
Monetary stimulus and political promises simply haven't worked for the Italian economy. Pressure is on fiscal policymakers and legislators to create meaningful change and inspire confidence.
This graph illustrates Italy's soaring debt, approaching 2.4 trillion euros. Its ratio of debt to GDP is a stunning 133%. In the final days of 2018, Italy was locked in a contentious battle with the European Commission over the size of the country's deficit. Italy's original 2019 budget plan included a deficit equal to 2.4% of the country's GDP, 3 times larger than the plan of the previous government. Ultimately, a deal was struck with the ECB to produce a plan with a deficit of 2.04% of GDP.
But according to Alessandro Masale, a political economist with State University of Milan, slower than expected growth means that the actual deficit could be as high as 3% of the GDP. We agree that Italy will not be able to keep its promise of 2.04%. The European Commission's cut growth forecast for Italy to 0.1% for 2019, down dramatically from the 1.2% it predicted in November. When interviewed recently, Masale found that if growth in Italy is 1 percentage point lower than an estimate, that means that the country would take in 18 billion euros less in tax rate.
Low confidence levels and political unrest have been driving these growth predictions lower and yields on Italian government bonds higher, pushing up the cost of borrowing. The spread of Italian 10-year bonds over top-rated Germany widened to over 250 basis points recently, renewing concerns that Italy will breach EU regulations on its budget deficit.
As you can see on this graph, Italy's unemployment rate rose to 10.7% in January and has remained above 10% for over 6 years. Youth unemployment in Italy, measuring job seekers from 15 to 24 years old, remains a grave concern. This rate rose to and is currently at 32.8% and recently climbed above Spain's for the first time in over a decade. In the Eurozone, only Greece has a higher youth unemployment rate than Italy.
Inflation in Italy held steady at 1.1% in March, up from 0.9% in January, but still well below the ECB target.
In broad strokes, we have painted a picture of a threatening Eurozone landscape and highlighted a precarious situation in Italy. Italy's in a pocket, caught between slow economic growth and dangerously high debt.
Its debt is growing, but its economy is not.
Italy's economy is not growing and its population is collapsing. As a member of the common currency bloc, Italy cannot simply increase their money supply. In our opinion, the best way out of this economic malaise is through targeted, bold fiscal policy and related structural reform. So we now dig deeper into our challenge. What role does fiscal policy and legislation play in promoting economic growth?
Let's first address 2 primary drivers of Italy's dilemma. 1. Insufficient capital expenditure, or CapEx, specifically regarding new technologies. And 2. Brain drain, the emigration of potential talent from the country.
Issue number 1, insufficient capex. The big Italian economy is trapped in a small business model. Indeed, 95% of Italian companies employ fewer than 10 employees. The predominance of small businesses without a natural path to growth and expansion has precluded competition and investment. Italy's biggest startup, Music Max, is ranked 79th internationally, a poor representation for such a large industrialized nation. Furthermore, compared to other industrialized countries, Italy's technology platform is archaic. E-commerce growth in Italy has constantly lagged behind the rest of Europe, and as displayed, continues to slow year after year.
Issue number 2, brain drain. The alarming rate of youth immigration is a dangerous risk to the Italian job market, and as we've seen, Italy is also not replacing its own population. Many young workers do not see or seek the benefits of Italian education, and their transition period from education to employment is inadequate. Worker protection laws make it hard to fire workers, which essentially pits older workers against younger workers. Young workers tend to get temporary contracts, while veteran company insiders tend to get more secure, long-term deals. So when companies need to shave costs, they fire younger employees. Because new jobs are so hard to find, nearly 50,000 workers left Italy last year, and 43% of young people plan on doing so in the future.
Last month, we connected with a school in Italy to get a first-hand account of the situation. We talked with high school students who confirmed that the current outlook for Italian youth is indeed distressing and that transformation is critically necessary.
Fiscal policy and structure reform can be an effective way to stimulate the economy, but Italy's policies have been counterproductive for too long. Piling on more debt isn't the answer. It hasn't worked. The government needs to find and use creative, bold tools to stimulate the economy.
Specifically, we propose 4 policy solutions. First, enact a massive Italian deregulation program. Second, reform the education system. Third, lower corporate taxes. And fourth, cut personal income taxes just for the youth. In regards to deregulation, stripping out cumbersome and unnecessary regulations, such as laws restricting mergers and acquisitions, can build confidence, promote growth, and increase foreign business competition, all without raising the deficit. The European market for Internet of Things, IoT, is growing, and Italy needs to aggressively embrace opportunities that lie in consumer and business IoT. Fiscal policymakers can lower barriers to entry and attract skilled specialists, particularly in the health and finance sectors.
Second, reform the education system. Italy's dropout rate is extremely high, particularly in the southern regions, where it can be as high as 20%, more than double the EU average. Tax revenues must be diverted from a cradle-to-grave welfare system to professional training, vocational schools, and higher education appeal. Italy needs to establish a legal and social framework to encourage young people to finish high school, contribute to an effective labor force, and boost productivity. The government must align incentives so that the Italians see the benefits of learning and work.
Third, lower corporate taxes so that businesses have money to invest in expansion. If businesses cannot generate enough profit to provide healthy returns to their shareholders will pull money and move it to faster growing economies. The aggregate corporate tax rate is currently 27.9%. We propose to reduce this rate to 24% in order to entice foreign capital and empower companies to invest in themselves.
Fourth, cut personal income taxes just for the youth. We want to target workers aged 18 to 25 with an incentive to work, luring young talent into the labor force with a special 3-year rate of 10%, less than half the current tax burden. We do not favor plans to simply throw money at the unemployed. Social welfare spending in Italy for 2019 was nearly 28% of the GDP, the 5th highest in the world. Our proposal rewards youth for hard work and creates a more productive Italy. We want to reduce youth unemployment to 20% over a 3-year period, matching pre-crisis levels.
Implementing these policy proposals will not be easy. We acknowledge that stimulative fiscal policy may create more debt in the short term, but the long-term gain is clear and critically necessary.
For too long, Italy has been trapped in a negative feedback loop of more spending, more borrowing, an aging population, and low growth. Italian per capita income is the same today as it was in 1999. It's time for structural reform. Our proposals open up Italian markets to the future, attracting young talent and capital, expanding business over time in the tax base, and creating a better future, not just for Italy, but for the Eurozone as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, round of applause.